Sarah Mitchell had always believed that kindness would never go unrewarded. Working as a security guard at the busy downtown shopping mall for 3 years, she had built a reputation for being fair, compassionate, and dedicated to her job. Every morning, she would arrive 30 minutes early, walk through each corridor, and make sure everything was in order before the stores opened. It was a typical Tuesday morning when Sarah noticed something unusual near the main entrance. A medium-sized German Shepherd was sitting quietly by the glass doors, looking tired and confused. The dog wore no collar, and its fur was matted and dirty, suggesting it had been on the streets for several days. Sarah's heart immediately went out to the animal. As shoppers began arriving for the day, many of them stopped to look at the dog. Some children wanted to pet it, while their parents hurried them along. Sarah watched as the dog remained calm and gentle, even when excited children approached. There was something special about this animal that made Sarah feel protective toward it. Her supervisor, Mr. Henderson, was known throughout the mall for his strict rules and zero-tolerance policy for anything that might disrupt business operations. When he arrived that morning and spotted the dog, his face turned red with anger. He marched straight to Sarah's security desk, his heavy footsteps echoing through the marble hallway. "Mitchell, get that animal out of here immediately," he barked, pointing toward the dog. "This is a shopping center, not a pound. I don't want to see that thing anywhere near this property." Sarah looked toward the dog, then back at her supervisor. "Sir, the dog isn't causing any trouble. Maybe we could contact animal control to pick it up safely." Mr. Henderson's eyes narrowed. "I don't care what you do with it. Just get it gone. Now." Sarah nodded and walked toward the entrance, hoping to gently guide the dog away from the building. As she approached, the animal looked up at her with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to convey both trust and exhaustion. She knelt down slowly, extending her hand for the dog to sniff. "Hey there, boy," she whispered softly. "You look like you need some help." The dog's tail wagged slightly, and it allowed Sarah to gently scratch behind its ears. As she did, she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. Around the dog's neck, barely visible beneath the matted fur, was a thin military-style collar with what appeared to be identification tags. Sarah carefully lifted the tags to read them. Her eyes widened as she saw the official military markings and a service number. This wasn't just a stray dog. This was a military working dog that had somehow become separated from its unit. The realization hit her like a wave. This dog had served its country, had possibly saved lives, and deserved far better treatment than being shooed away from shopping mall. Sarah felt a surge of determination rise within her chest. She stood up and walked back to where Mr. Henderson was waiting, his foot tapping impatiently against the floor. Several mall employees had gathered nearby, curious about the situation. "Sir, this isn't just any stray dog," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's a military service dog. Look at these tags." Mr. Henderson barely glanced at what she was showing him. "I don't care if it's the president's pet poodle. Get it out of here or you'll be looking for a new job." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. She had always followed orders without question, but this felt different. This felt wrong. The dog had served honorably, and she couldn't simply abandon it to wander the streets. "With respect, sir, I think we should contact the proper authorities. This dog might be reported missing. Its handlers could be looking for it." The color in Mr. Henderson's face deepened to purple. "Are you refusing a direct order, Mitchell?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah looked around at her co-workers, some of whom were nodding encouragingly while others looked concerned for her job security. She thought about her rent, her car payment, and all the financial responsibilities that depended on her paycheck. But when she looked back at the dog, still sitting patiently by the entrance, she knew what she had to do. "Sir, I can't in good conscience force a military service dog onto the streets. This animal has served our country and deserves our respect and protection." Mr. Henderson's voice rose loud enough for everyone in the entrance area to hear. "Fine, Mitchell, you've made your choice. Consider yourself terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." A hush fell over the gathered crowd. Sarah felt her stomach drop as the reality of what had just happened sank in. She had lost her job, her steady income, and her health insurance, all for a dog she had just met. But as she looked at the grateful expression in the dog's eyes, she realized she didn't regret her decision. Some things were more important than a paycheck, and integrity was one of them. Two security guards approached to escort her out, their faces showing sympathy for her situation. As Sarah gathered her personal belongings from her desk, word of what had happened began spreading through the mall like wildfire. Within an hour, Sarah found herself sitting on a bench outside the shopping center with a German shepherd beside her, both of them uncertain about what would happen next. She pulled out her phone and began searching for military contacts who might help reunite the dog with its proper handlers. What Sarah didn't know was that her act of conscience was about to set in motion a series of events that would change not only her life, but the lives of many others. The story of her stand for what was right was already beginning to spread beyond the walls of the shopping mall, reaching ears that had the power to make a real difference. The news of Sarah's firing spread through social media faster than anyone could have imagined. A teenage customer named Jake had witnessed the entire confrontation and recorded parts of it on his phone. By evening, the video had been shared thousands of times with captions like "Security guard loses job, defending military dog," and "Woman stands up for hero dog." Sarah spent her first day of unemployment at home, trying to care for the German shepherd she had decided to call Max until his real name could be discovered. She had used her last $60 to buy dog food, a leash, and some basic supplies. Max seemed grateful for the attention, though he remained alert and disciplined in a way that confirmed his military training. The phone call started coming in around noon. First, it was a local news reporter who wanted to interview Sarah about her story. Then came calls from animal rights organizations, veteran support groups, and ordinary citizens who had seen the viral video and wanted to help. "This is exactly the kind of story that shows what's wrong with corporate America," said Maria Santos, a reporter from Channel 7 News, as she set up her camera equipment in Sarah's small apartment. "A woman does the right thing and gets punished for it." During the interview, Sarah explained her decision simply. "I couldn't look at that dog and turn my back on him. He served our country. The least I could do was make sure he was treated with dignity." When asked about losing her job, Sarah's voice remained steady despite the uncertainty she felt inside. "I have savings for about 2 months. After that, I'll figure something out. But I don't regret what I did." The interview aired that evening during prime time, and the response was immediate. Sarah's phone rang constantly with offers of help, job opportunities, and donations from strangers who had been moved by her story. Meanwhile, the military was taking notice too. The video and news coverage had reached the desk of Colonel James Wright at the nearby Marine Corps base. Colonel Wright was responsible for the K-9 unit, and he immediately recognized the dog's military bearing and equipment. He assigned Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez, one of his most experienced dog handlers, to investigate the situation. Sergeant Rodriguez had worked with military dogs for 8 years and could identify a trained service animal from a distance. When she arrived at Sarah's apartment the next morning, both women felt an immediate connection. Sergeant Rodriguez examined Max carefully, checking his physical condition and observing his responses to various commands. "This is definitely one of ours," she confirmed, running her hand along Max's sides to check for injuries. "His tag number shows he's assigned to the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force. His name is actually Rex, and he's been missing for 6 days." Sarah felt a mix of relief and sadness. She was glad that Rex would be reunited with his proper handlers, but she had grown attached to the noble animal in just 2 days. Sergeant Rodriguez noticed Sarah's expression. "You save his life, you know. Rex has been through 3 combat deployments in Afghanistan. He's detected dozens of explosive devices and saved countless lives. When he went missing during a training exercise, we feared the worst." The story of how Rex had become lost was both simple and heartbreaking. During a routine training exercise in a wooded area outside the city, Rex had been tracking a scent when a severe thunderstorm struck. In the confusion of the storm and the loud thunder, Rex had become separated from his handler. For 6 days, the highly trained dog had wandered through unfamiliar territory, eventually making his way to the shopping mall where Sarah found him. Military dogs are trained to approach civilian areas when they're lost, Sergeant Rodriguez explained. Rex was doing exactly what he was supposed to do. He found a safe, public place and waited for help. As news of Rex's military service spread, public opinion about Sarah's firing became even more supportive. Social media posts began calling for a boycott of the shopping mall, and several local businesses offered Sarah job interviews. But the most significant call came from Colonel Wright himself. He wanted to meet Sarah personally to thank her for her service to one of his Marines. In the military, we have a saying Colonel Wright told Sarah when they met at the base. "We leave no one behind." That includes our four-legged Marines. What you did exemplifies the values we try to instill in all our service members. The meeting was arranged for the following day at the Marine base, where Sarah would be formally thanked for her actions. Local media was invited to cover the ceremony, turning what had started as a simple act of kindness into a much larger story about values, sacrifice, and doing what's right. At the same time, the shopping mall was experiencing its own challenges. The negative publicity from Sarah's firing had resulted in several stores threatening to break their leases, and customer complaints were pouring in daily. Mall management was beginning to realize that their harsh treatment of Sarah had created a public relations nightmare. Mr. Henderson found himself called into multiple meetings with upper management, regional supervisors, and even corporate executives who were concerned about the damage to the company's reputation. The video of his confrontation with Sarah had been viewed over 1 million times, and comments overwhelmingly criticized his handling of the situation. "We need to fix this," the regional manager told him during a tense conference call. "This story is making us look heartless and unpatriotic." But for Sarah, the focus remained on doing right by Rex. She had formed a bond with the dog that went beyond the circumstances that brought them together. When she learned about his service record and the lives he had saved, she felt even more certain that her decision had been correct. The night before the ceremony at the Marine base, Sarah sat with Rex in her living room, gently brushing his fur until it shone. She had purchased a new collar for him, plain but dignified, to replace the worn military one until he could be properly outfitted again. "Tomorrow, you go back to your real family," she told him, scratching behind his ears. "But I want you to know that meeting you changed my life. You reminded me what real courage looks like." Rex seemed to understand, resting his head on her lap as they watched the evening news, which featured another story about their unlikely partnership and the upcoming ceremony. What neither Sarah nor the Marines knew was that their story had reached even higher levels of government and military leadership. Plans were already in motion that would transform this local story into something much bigger, with consequences that would surprise everyone involved. The morning of the ceremony at the Marine base dawned clear and bright. Sarah dressed carefully in her best professional outfit, knowing that this would be one of the most important days of her life. Rex sat patiently beside her as she prepared, his intelligent eyes seeming to understand the significance of the day. When they arrived at the base, Sarah was surprised by the scale of the event that had been organized. What she had expected to be a small, private ceremony had grown into something much larger. Local news crews were setting up equipment, and dozens of Marines in dress uniforms were preparing for what appeared to be a formal military ceremony. Colonel Wright greeted Sarah personally at the entrance. "Ms. Mitchell, I hope you don't mind, but word of what you did has reached some very important people. This ceremony has taken on a life of its own." As they walked across the parade ground, Sarah could see Marines assembling in formation. Rex walked beside her with the disciplined gait of a military dog, his head held high as if he knew he was returning home. Sergeant Rodriguez met them at the ceremony site, and Sarah could see tears in the experienced handler's eyes as she was reunited with Rex. "I've worked with Rex for 2 years," she explained to Sarah. "He's not just my partner, he's family. When we lost him during that storm, it was like losing a brother." The formal ceremony began with Colonel Wright addressing the assembled Marines and guests. He spoke about the bond between military personnel and their working dogs, and the importance of the values that Sarah had demonstrated. In the Marine Corps, we talk about honor, courage, and commitment, Colonel Wright said, his voice carrying across the parade ground. These aren't just words to us. They're the principles that guide every decision we make. When MS. Sarah Mitchell chose to protect one of our own, even at the cost of her own livelihood. She demonstrated these values as clearly as any Marine I've ever known. The crowd of spectators had grown beyond what anyone had expected. In addition to the news crews, dozens of local residents had come to witness the ceremony. Many held signs supporting Sarah, and some veterans in the crowd wiped away tears as they listened to the colonel's words. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. As Colonel Wright continued his speech, a convoy of official vehicles arrived at the base entrance. Sarah watched in amazement as several high-ranking military officers stepped out, followed by what appeared to be civilian government officials. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colonel Wright announced, "I'm honored to introduce General Patricia Hayes, commanding officer of the Marine Corps Forces Command, who has traveled here specifically to address today's ceremony." General Hayes was a distinguished woman with silver hair and bearing that commanded immediate respect. As she approached the podium, the assembled Marines snapped to attention with a precision that impressed even the civilian spectators. "When I heard about the actions of Ms. Sarah Mitchell," General Hayes began, "I knew I had to be here personally. In my 30 years of military service, I've seen courage take many forms. Sometimes it's displayed on the battlefield, sometimes in training, and sometimes it appears in the most unexpected places." She turned to address Sarah directly. "What you did, Ms. Mitchell, embodies everything we try to teach our Marines about moral courage. You saw what was right, and you did it regardless of the personal cost. That's the kind of character we need more of in this world." The ceremony continued with the formal presentation of Rex back to his unit. Sergeant Rodriguez attached a new collar bearing his official designation, and Rex seemed to transform before everyone's eyes, standing at attention with the bearing of a combat veteran. But General Hayes wasn't finished. "Ms. Mitchell, your actions have not gone unnoticed at the highest levels of military leadership. Today, I'm honored to present you with the Civilian Award for Meritorious Service, recognizing your exceptional contribution to the welfare of a military service member." Sarah felt her knees go weak as she realized what was happening. This award was typically reserved for civilian contractors or government employees who made significant contributions to military operations. She had never imagined that her simple act of kindness would be recognized at such a level. As the general pinned the medal to Sarah's jacket, the assembled Marines erupted in applause. The sound was thunderous, lasting for several minutes as the crowd showed their appreciation for her sacrifice. The media coverage of the ceremony was extensive, with every major news network picking up the story. The image of General Hayes presenting the award to Sarah, with Rex sitting proudly beside them, appeared on front pages across the country. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came during a brief private conversation between Sarah and General Hayes after the public ceremony had concluded. "Ms. Mitchell," the general said, "I want you to know that your story has been shared throughout our command structure. You've reminded a lot of us why we serve and what we're protecting. That's worth more than any medal I could give you." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the recognition, but also concerned about her future. "General, I'm honored by all of this, but I still need to find a job. I can't pay rent with medals." General Hayes smiled. "I think you'll find that won't be a problem much longer. Your story has reached some very influential people in the private sector as well. But more importantly, you've shown that character still matters in this world." As the ceremony wound down and the crowds began to disperse, Sarah had a chance to say goodbye to Rex one final time. The dog seemed to remember her kindness, nuzzling against her hand as she scratched behind his ears. "Take care of yourself, boy," she whispered. "You're a hero, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Sergeant Rodriguez promised to keep Sarah updated on Rex's well-being, and Colonel Wright extended an open invitation for her to visit the base anytime she wanted to see her four-legged friend. As Sarah drove home that evening, Her phone was already buzzing with messages from potential employers, interview requests from national news programs, and congratulations from friends and strangers alike. The metal sat on her passenger seat, catching the light from passing street lamps. What she didn't know was that her story had also caught the attention of some very powerful people in the corporate world, including the board of directors of the company that owned the shopping mall where she had been fired. Decisions were being made at the highest levels that would soon turn her life upside down once again, but this time in ways she could never have imagined. The morning after the ceremony, Sarah woke up to discover her life had fundamentally changed overnight. Her phone showed over 200 missed calls, her email inbox was flooded with messages, and news vans were parked outside her apartment building. The story of her military recognition had exploded into national news. Among the chaos of media attention and job offers, one call stood out. It came from Marcus Thompson, the CEO of Thompson Holdings, the corporation that owned the shopping mall chain where Sarah had been fired. Ms. Mitchell, Thompson's voice was formal but respectful. I believe we need to have a conversation about your recent experience with our company. Would you be willing to meet with me and our board of directors? Sarah was hesitant. She had no interest in returning to a company that had treated her so poorly, regardless of who was asking. But something in Thompson's tone suggested this wasn't a typical corporate damage control call. The meeting was arranged for the following day at the company's regional headquarters, a gleaming office building downtown. Sarah arrived wearing her best interview suit, the military medal prominently displayed on her lapel. When she was escorted into the boardroom, she was surprised to find not just Marcus Thompson, but the entire board of directors waiting for her. These were some of the most powerful business leaders in the region, and they all stood when she entered the room. Thompson began the meeting with an apology that was both comprehensive and sincere. Ms. Mitchell, our company failed you in the worst possible way. Your supervisor's actions were not just wrong. They were contrary to every value our company claims to represent. He went on to explain that the board had conducted a full investigation into the incident. The security footage from the mall told the complete story, and the contrast between Sarah's professionalism and her supervisor's behavior was stark and undeniable. Mr. Henderson has been terminated, Thompson continued, not just from his position at that mall, but from our company entirely. His conduct was unacceptable, and we take full responsibility for failing to properly train and supervise our management staff. But Thompson wasn't finished. Ms. Mitchell, we would like to offer you something more substantial than just your old job back. We want to offer you the position of Regional Security Director, overseeing security operations for all 15 of our shopping centers in this area. Sarah felt her breath catch. The position Thompson was describing was several levels above her previous job, with a salary that was more than double what she had been earning as a security guard. Additionally, Thompson continued, we would like to establish the Sarah Mitchell Protocol for military service animal assistance. Any military service animal found on our properties will receive immediate care and assistance in reuniting with their handlers. We want to ensure that what happened to you and Rex never happens again. The board members around the table nodded in agreement. Sarah could see that this wasn't just a public relations move. These business leaders had been genuinely affected by her story and wanted to make meaningful changes. But perhaps the most surprising part of the offer was still to come. Ms. Mitchell, we've also been in contact with several veteran service organizations about partnering with them to provide support for retired military working dogs. We'd like you to head up that initiative as part of your new role. Sarah sat in stunned silence for several moments. A week ago, she had been a shopping mall security guard struggling to make ends meet. Now she was being offered an executive position with a major corporation, along with the opportunity to help other military animals like Rex. I need some time to think about this, Sarah finally said. This is a lot to process. Thompson smiled. Of course. Take all the time you need. But I hope you'll consider it. Your actions showed the kind of character and leadership we need more of in our organization. As Sarah left the meeting, her head was spinning with possibilities. The salary increase alone would completely change her financial situation, and the opportunity to help military working dogs felt like a perfect way to honor what Rex had taught her about service and sacrifice. That evening, she visited the Marine base to share the news with Colonel Wright and Sergeant Rodriguez. Rex was being kept in the base kennels while plans were made for his next assignment, and Sarah was thrilled to see him healthy and alert. "That's incredible news," Colonel Wright said when Sarah told him about the job offer. "But more importantly, it shows that your story is inspiring real change. That's the true value of moral courage. It ripples outward and affects others." Sergeant Rodriguez was equally excited about the proposed military working dog support program. "There are so many retired service dogs who need help with medical care and placement in good homes," she explained. "Having a corporate partner could make a huge difference in their lives." As Sarah spent time with Rex that evening, she reflected on the week that had changed everything. 7 days ago, she had been a woman with a routine job and a quiet life. Now she was facing decisions that would affect not just her own future, but potentially the lives of military service animals across the region. The media attention continued to grow. Sarah received interview requests from national television programs, and her story was featured in newspapers across the country. The phrase "stay away from that dog" had become a rallying cry for people who believed in standing up for what's right, regardless of the consequences. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Sarah received a handwritten letter from the Pentagon, signed by the Secretary of Defense himself, thanking her for her service to the military community and commending her character. "Your actions remind us all that patriotism isn't just about serving in uniform," the letter read. "Sometimes it's about being willing to sacrifice for others, even when no one is watching. Thank you for representing the best of American values." As Sarah read the letter for the third time, sitting in her small apartment with Rex's temporary dog bed still in the corner, she realized that her decision to help one lost dog had connected her to something much larger than herself. She had become part of a community of people who believed that doing right was worth any cost. The job offer from Thompson Holdings was generous and exciting, but Sarah knew her decision would be based on more than just money or career advancement. She needed to choose the path that would allow her to continue honoring the values that Rex had reminded her she possessed. The next morning, she would call Marcus Thompson with her answer. But first, she wanted to visit Rex one more time and tell him about the doors his story had opened, not just for her, but for military working dogs everywhere. 6 months later, Sarah Mitchell stood in the conference room of her new office, looking out the window at the parking lot where she had once patrolled as a security guard. The irony wasn't lost on her that she now occupied an executive suite in a building owned by the same company that had fired her. As regional security director for Thompson Holdings, Sarah had transformed not just her own life, but the entire culture of the company's security operations. The Sarah Mitchell Protocol had been implemented across all company properties, and it had already helped reunite 3 military working dogs with their handlers. But the changes went far beyond policy. Sarah had insisted on comprehensive training for all security staff about recognizing and assisting military personnel and their service animals. She had also established partnerships with local veteran organizations to provide job opportunities for former military members seeking civilian careers. The military working dog support program had exceeded everyone's expectations. In partnership with the Marine Corps and several other military branches, Thompson Holdings had funded medical care for over 50 retired service dogs and helped place them in loving homes with veteran families. Rex had played a special role in launching the program. After completing his final deployment, he had been officially retired from active duty and adopted by Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been his handler for his last 2 years of service. They visited Sarah's office regularly, with Rex serving as an informal mascot for the program that bore his story. On this particular morning, Sarah was preparing for a presentation to the company's National Board of Directors. Thompson Holdings had decided to expand the military support program to all their properties nationwide, and they wanted Sarah to oversee the implementation. "The numbers speak for themselves," Sarah told the assembled executives via video conference. Our customer satisfaction scores have increased by 30% at properties where we've implemented the military support protocol. More importantly, we've identified and assisted 12 active-duty military families who are having difficulties connecting them with appropriate resources. Marcus Thompson, who had become not just Sarah's boss, but a genuine mentor, smiled as he listened to her presentation. "Sarah, when we first offered you this position, we hoped you would bring your values to our company culture. You've exceeded our wildest expectations." The presentation concluded with the unanimous approval of the nationwide expansion. Sarah would be promoted again, this time to Vice President of Community Relations and Military Affairs, with responsibility for rolling out the program to over 200 shopping centers across 15 states. But perhaps the most satisfying part of Sarah's new role was the impact it had on individual lives. Her desk was covered with letters from military families who had been helped by the program, photos of reunited service dogs and their handlers, and thank you notes from veterans who had found employment through the company's veteran hiring initiative. One letter, in particular, had moved Sarah to tears when she first received it. It was from the widow of a Marine who had been killed in Afghanistan, along with his bomb detection dog. The woman had struggled for months to get death benefits for her husband's canine partner, which her young children considered a member of their family. "Your program helped us navigate the bureaucracy and get the recognition our family's four-legged Marine deserved," the woman had written. "My children now understand that their father died protecting others and that his dog was a hero too. Thank you for making sure military animals receive the honor they've earned." Sarah kept that letter in her desk drawer, pulling it out whenever she needed a reminder of why her work mattered. The media attention had eventually subsided, but Sarah's story continued to inspire others. She received speaking requests from military academies, business schools, and civic organizations who wanted to hear about the importance of moral courage in everyday decisions. During one such speech at a local high school, a student asked her if she ever regretted her decision to help Rex, knowing it would cost her job. "I regret that I lived for 3 years working under a supervisor who valued rules more than compassion," Sarah answered. "But I'll never regret choosing to help someone who needed it, even if I didn't know where that choice would lead." The shopping mall where Sarah had first encountered Rex had undergone its own transformation. Under new management, it had become known as one of the most military-friendly shopping centers in the region. A plaque near the main entrance commemorated Rex's story and Sarah's courage, and the mall regularly hosted events supporting local veteran organizations. Mr. Henderson, the supervisor who had fired Sarah, had struggled to find new employment after his termination became public knowledge. The viral video of his confrontation with Sarah had made him unemployable in customer service roles. Sarah had heard through mutual acquaintances that he had eventually moved to another state for a fresh start. Despite everything he had put her through, Sarah felt no satisfaction in his difficulties. She had learned that holding onto anger only diminished her ability to focus on positive change. On the anniversary of the day she had first met Rex, Sarah received an unexpected visitor at her office. General Patricia Hayes, who had presented her with the Military Service Award, was in town for a conference and wanted to deliver a message in person. "Ms. Mitchell," the general said, settling into the chair across from Sarah's desk, "I wanted you to know that your story has become part of our leadership training curriculum. We use it to teach young Marines about the importance of moral courage and standing up for what's right." She paused and smiled. "But more than that, your actions have inspired a change in military policy. We're implementing new procedures for reporting and recovering lost military working dogs, and we're establishing better partnerships with civilian authorities to help with recovery efforts." Sarah felt a wave of pride that was different from anything she had experienced before. Her simple decision to help a lost dog had created ripples that were still spreading, improving the lives of military animals and their handlers across the country. That evening, Sarah visited Rex at Sergeant Rodriguez's home. The retired military dog was living a comfortable life, playing with Rodriguez's children and serving as a therapy dog for other veterans dealing with post-traumatic stress. As Sarah scratched Rex behind the ears, The same gesture that had started their friendship a year ago. She reflected on how much both their lives had changed. "You taught me something important, boy," she told him. "You showed me that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. And sometimes when you're brave enough to stand up for what's right, the whole world changes around you." Rex's tail wagged as if he understood, and Sarah knew that whatever challenges lay ahead in her career, she would face them with the same moral courage that had guided her decision to help a lost military dog on a quiet Tuesday morning. The story that had begun with a fired security guard and a homeless service animal had evolved into something much larger, a testament to the power of individual conscience and the ripple effects of moral courage. It served as a reminder that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on distant battlefields, but in everyday moments when ordinary people choose to do extraordinary things.